Welcome back to Do-It-Myself Garage. I don't know if you can tell when I pulled it in, but it's wet. That wasn't from rain. It snowed today. That's kind of a slushy sleet. But that's Minnesota for you. It'll probably be 80 next week. Anyhow, the big project today is I've got to put a timing belt in here. I've got over 60,000 miles on it. They recommend 50 to 60,000 on these 2.4 liter engines on the Mitsubishis to change out the timing belt. I have not done it. I bought it with 95,000 miles on it, and I have 155,000 on it now. So yeah, time to change that timing belt. I'm not going to mess with the heater. I do have the switch. What's really funny, now that I was playing around in there, now when I turn it from hot to cold on the blend door, the little motor's going back and forth. Well, it's not hooked up anymore, but the motor's going back and forth now. So I'm going to leave it disconnected. I have heat, that's the important part, but right now, I gotta make sure that this timing belt doesn't fail on me. These are interference engines, so if you lose a timing belt, you could very easily pop a valve right into the cylinder, into the piston, and you're done. So let's go ahead and get working on this. I've got the kit here on the counter that I already opened and kind of looked at. I'm gonna have to look up some videos myself on how to do this. I'll walk you through the process that I'm doing, and hopefully you can see if it's something you want to tackle yourself. Fortunately, the garage is nice and warm inside. Nobody's been kind enough to let all the warm air out, so that's good. Should not have to run the heater. I think we're going to start off by disconnecting the battery. There's no reason to have that connected. While I'm working on stuff over here, there are some electronics and whatnot. And we'll have to see how much I have of this I have to take apart in order to replace the timing belt. Looks like it's right under this cover. So hopefully it's not as bad as it looks. Okay, so I've been doing some research. This is a bit more involved than I thought it was, but I'm still going to attempt it. I've got my drain here. Put it in the car. I'm going to drain the radiator because I am going to be doing the water pump at the same time. If you're not going to do the water pump, then you don't have to do this part. So I'm just going to go down in here and at the bottom of the radiator. You'll see down there, there's the little petcock. Turn that little plastic valve down there. Hopefully it'll focus, yeah. Just turn that little guy and you should be able to drain your radiator. Yeah, might help to open up the cap as well. While it's draining, we're just going to pull this coolant tank. It just pulls up. I had it off here before when I did the belt, so it came off a little bit easier. Just slides in here. We can just set this off to the side. Okay, so the main thing we have to do right now, now that I got the cover out of the way, is I've got to get the serpentine belts off of here. So that involves loosening up the water pump and loosening up the alternator in order to get those belts on and get them out of the way. Then we need to take the engine mount off, which means we need to put a jack under the engine to hold it in place and to get the weight off of this. And apparently you can just jack it up right on the oil pan if you're careful, because you're really not going to be lifting the engine. You're just kind of holding the weight. So you can get these off and get this out of there. You're just holding the engine while you're working on it. I am going to jack the car up and take the right front wheel off and get that inner housing out of there, the splash guard, so I can work on the bottom part of the timing belt area also. So this is quite involved. There's a lot to take apart here. I'll go through it all, and if I run into anything or notice anything, I'll bring you along, but I'll try to go step by step because, this is first time for me, and I didn't see a lot of really good videos on the internet. So hopefully this will be a more updated one that'll be fairly easy to follow. There's a bolt under the power steering pump right down in here. And that is the bolt that goes to the back of the tensioner pulley. It's right under there. I'm sorry I can't get a good picture of it. Then there's a bolt here, and this is the actual tension, this one right here. So what you do is just loosen up the the bolt on the bottom that holds the pulley so it doesn't slide. Loosen that up a little bit, and then you loosen this up a whole bunch of cranks counterclockwise. I'm trying to get a good light here for you. Sorry about the strobing. Anyway, loosen that bolt up a whole bunch, and now the belt is loose. So no different than when we put the belts on. That's how you got it on and off of there before. So we're gonna pull that off of there right now so it's out of the way. All right, so then we're gonna do the same thing back here with the alternator. You're gonna loosen up this bolt right here that tensions it, and then you're gonna adjust this bolt. I'm sorry, this bolt locks it, and this bolt does the tension. So we're gonna loosen this up so it'll slide, and then we'll adjust this one until we can get the belt off. Okay, so far so good. I got the belts off of there. They're just fished down. They're not off of there completely yet. Now I'm gonna work on taking these 4 bolts off of this upper timing cover. And then I'm gonna get the wheel off of here, get this thing jacked up, and see about getting this motor mount off. But let me go ahead and get this cover off first. There's 4 bolts. There's one here, 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 and down here. If you're not sure if your timing belt needs to be changed, this would be a good way to inspect it. You could pull this off of here and look at it real quick and see how bad a shape it's in. And she's in good shape. So apparently there's a what is it? It's called a counterbalance belt. Apparently there's some counterbalancing in the engine, because these are 4 cylinders that they use that helps to offset. It's on the oil pump. It's the guy explained it. Anyway, apparently that's the belt that fails, and usually that belt fails, comes over and gets tangled up in all of this. And so that's what causes the problem. That's what usually breaks your main timing belt. So this main timing belt might look okay, but if that counterbalance belt inside of there fails, it'll take out the whole works. So she is showing some cracks. I'll try to show it to you better later when I get it out of here. But yeah, she's got some cracks in her. So I'm definitely glad I decided to take it apart. Decided to go ahead and jack it up on the oil pan. I've got this piece I cut out. I think it was for when I was making a dog dish, a dog feeder. So I'm going to put this on the jack so kind of spread out the pressure a little bit more. All right, getting ahead of myself. I've got to get this thing up on the jack stand first. All right, now that we got the tire off, the area we need to get to is kind of right in here. So we're going to take this plastic cover off. Just as a side note, I took a look at my pads. I'm going to be doing a brake job here really soon too, so that'll be in an upcoming video if you're interested. Just wanted to show somebody else here, in case you were curious. If you can see those light cracks in there, you know, that's not good. Again, it's the counterweight belt that tends to fail a little more often, but this belt already has 60,000 miles on it, and being an interference engine, you don't want to take any chances. So yes, that's what it looks like when you probably should be replacing it. Okay, so I've got the jack under there, holding some weight up on the engine. Now I'm going to take this motor mount loose to hopefully get then the engine shouldn't drop. There's the tension of the weight should be off this motor mount. So let me go ahead and get this loosened here. All right, so you've got this bolt here, and you've got these 2 bolts here. This should come apart. I don't think I have to take this bolt out. We'll find out here in a minute if I miss something. So yeah, this bolt needed to come out also. And I could not find couldn't get my impact. I borrowed it to somebody. But I got it. Alright, so now this should just come right out of here now. In theory. So center bolt out, both support bolts out. Yeah, just comes right out of there. Don't lose your vibration pads. All right, that really gives me some good access in here. Yeah, I don't think that power steering pump needs to come off, but I could still be proved wrong yet. Let's go ahead and get this panel off on the inside down here so I can get to everything else. So these three little clips, I don't know what kind of ends they have in them. You're supposed to screw them out or something. They wouldn't screw out, so I just had to pry them. Whatever. And then there's 3 bolts that go up into here, and then this whole cover comes off. You can see where the 3 bolts are. Anyhow, got that out. Now I can actually get in here and work on this. Yes, you need to take the front tire off to really work on this properly. Now I've got to break these bolts loose. Hopefully this comes apart. I got to get this pulley off of here so we can get the cover off, so we can get the timing belt replaced. As I mentioned yesterday, I borrowed out my impact. So I put a 1/2-inch drive breaker bar in here and put that in the middle, and then I just used a ratchet, got a wrench on these bolts, and they've all snapped loose, so without much problem. But worked nice because I could, kind of pin that breaker bar up against the frame, keep the engine from turning, and she's loose. Let's get it off to the rest of the way. My understanding is that this is supposed to come right off. It was mentioned in a few videos that I watched, because they did show this part. They didn't show anything else up to this previously. So hopefully this helps some people that didn't know how to get into this part. Anyway, that pulley should come off, but it might take a little bit of banging on it with a hammer. I'm going to hit it with a rubber mallet. It should come off, but it may very well be rusted like mine is. Couple solid taps with the rubber mallet around the edge. She came right off, so that was, actually I'm impressed with that. It came off. So this is where we're at now. You can see that inner belt, or the timing belt in there, and then there's another inner belt that's for the counterweights. So we've got to get that cover off now. We're getting down to the finish line here as far as getting stuff apart. Alright, so there were only 3 retaining screws for the cover down there, but there is one more screw up here. It's that smaller one behind this big one that my camera's focusing on. It's that small one right there. And it's pretty obvious when you look at it from underneath. So I just have to get a wrench on that and take that one out, and then the cover should come off, hopefully. Actually, I think I have to take that pulley off also, but let me double check. I'll let you know. Getting all the screws out of the cover is proving to be a little bit of a task. So anyway, there's another screw up here, and you really can't get to it unless you lower the engine. So I did let some of the pressure off the engine. It dropped down a little bit. Now I can get my ratchet up in there and get it on that last. Hopefully that's the last screw. Again, I'm not sure if I take that pulley off yet, but I'm about to find out. So to get those 4 bolts out, a little creativity is required. You can use one wrench and break the other 3 loose, but the 4th one, what I did is I got them out a little ways so I had a little more leverage room, and then I stuck a screwdriver between 2 of them that were sticking out, and then I could loosen the 4th one. Oh, that's been the worst part so far, is getting that stupid pulley off. So yes, they actually put a bolt behind the pulley. So here's that bolt. It's the only reason you have to take that pulley off is because there's a bolt behind it that holds the cover. Now I should be able to fish the cover out of here, out the bottom. We should actually be able to start working on the car. Alright, so now one of the most important things is you need to get the timing marks lined up before you take anything apart. So there's a little tab in the top of this cover up here, right there. Little tab in this metal piece, and they have it marked from the factory. It's lining straight up with that. Then you come down here, and this is this counterweight belt, or this is the oil pump, I'm sorry. So this one's got to line up here, because there's apparently a counterweight inside of there that needs to line up, so you can't just put that wherever you want. Otherwise, apparently your engine will rattle like a son of a gun. And then over here, there's a notch in this outer ring. It'll be kind of hard to see, but it's kind of lined up with that notch. So kind of make a mental note of where you're at. And then this one's going to be a little harder to see, but there's also a timing mark up on this one up here that lines up also. So this timing mark right here lines up with that notch in the case there. So when you have it spun all the way around, and you might have to go around, you know, more than one full time because of the, you know, the different size of these pulleys in order to get these lined up. But you want these all lined up before you take it apart. Those are the only ones that matter is the geared ones. So obviously it has a drive gear on here, you know, drive gear on here. So you've got to have those lined up or you will have a very bad day. All right, so I put a locking jaw pliers on that oil pump pulley so that way you don't lose its position, because apparently it has 4 different positions and I know it works and it doesn't rattle. So in other words, it's in balance. We'll get the belt and everything off of there. We'll fish it around. There shouldn't be a problem. Can always hold it in place when I pull the belt off. Otherwise, it is kind of a pain. You got to take a bolt off the front of the engine, shove a wrench down inside, and make sure you have the timing on it right. So don't lose the timing of that. And that, well, that's the tensioner right there. I'm going to take the 2 bolts out of that, the 12 millimeter, and we'll get this out of here. Once you take that tensioner off, your belt literally will fall off. So now I've got to fish this out of here. Because my kit came with all new rollers, I'm going to have to remove the 2 bolts, this one down here and this one up here for the power steering pump, to move it out of the way. There's nothing else you really need to do with it. It should just come loose, slide out of the way, and then you can get that roller out of there, and then we can replace that idler pulley in there since my kit came with it. So there's 2 more bolts holding this in, this power steering pump in. There's this top one here, and the bottom one, which one I already have loose. Somehow I missed seeing this top one, but we'll get it out of there. That's the hardest thing I've done yet, that stupid power steering pump bolts. Got them out of there. I ended up taking a couple of bolts loose on the back that are just hold some brackets and stuff. Just so you know too, I had mentioned you may have to jack the engine up and down as you go to get stuff in and out for clearance, because there's not a lot of clearance in here. Now, this is the idler pulley that I had to take all that apart just to replace that. If you're not replacing that idler pulley, you do not have to take the power steering pump apart. I have all 3 old pulleys out of there. On this kit, that's the part number that lined up with that one. That's the part number that lined up with that one. That's the one I just took out now. And that's the part number that lined up with the tensioner pulley. So I'm going to replace all 3 of those. When I get to that point, I think I'm going to work on the water pump now. Before I get to the water pump, I take this belt off of here. I forgot to mention, you have to take the crankshaft position sensor off in order to get this balancer belt off of here. So I'm going to go ahead and pop those off real quick. All right, I got a light here that's not going to strobe on us. Look at that. So as other people have mentioned before, this is the belt that tends to fail first. And yeah, I probably made it a little while longer, but when this one fails, it takes everything out. Usually destroys the crankshaft position sensor, the other belt. You lose your, well, you don't lose your oil pressure, but yeah. Well, you will if it takes out the timing belt. Interference engine, you don't want to mess around with this stuff. So replace your belts when they're supposed to. So you've got the top bolt for the water pump actually holds the alternator, so I'm going to have to pop that one loose. And then I believe there's 4 other bolts we got to do. We should be able to reach them from down below with just a ratchet. All right, be sure you have your waste container ready before you pop that last bolt. Mine came right off. It was probably replaced the last time they did the belt. It's pretty standard procedure on these cars. So it wasn't stuck on there. I'm hoping the gasket comes off easy. Water pump came out of there pretty clean. Looks like the whole gasket stayed on the engine though. Hopefully I can get that off. Alright, so the water pump came out fairly easily. The gasket did stay on the engine, so let's see how hard that is to get off. It's actually kind of hopeful because it didn't come off in chunks. So that's always a good thing. Be sure on this feed pipe here to replace that O-ring. There's one that came in my kit with mine, so be sure you replace that O-ring. Remember the O-ring kit I bought? Well, I don't need the O-ring, but there was a really nice tool that came in that set that has a little hook on it. And you can go right down in here and grab this sucker off here, because I tried grabbing it with my fingers and it wasn't working. I don't know if I can do this one-handed, but I will try. There we go. A lot easier than trying to get your fingernails under there. Alright, and I will grab the new O-ring and put it on there before I forget. New O-ring is installed. I've got the surface of the water pump all cleaned off. I had laid out the bolts exactly how they came off the pump. I put a little bit of just a light adhesive on the back of this thing. It's just really light glue, like a tack glue, just so the gasket wouldn't fight me going in. For the life of me, I could not get that thing started on that standpipe and that feed pipe there. So I ended up putting a crowbar against the frame, kind of pushed on it, had it squared up, lined up as best I could, and then she slid on there. I did wet the gasket a little bit with some antifreeze that was sitting there, so that seemed to help, but I got it under square. I did slip once with the crowbar, so I kind of scratched up my aluminum housing a little bit, but she's on there. Now I just got to get the bolts in it. I'll be honest, that water pump kind of kicked my butt a little bit. I ended up taking it off again, starting a couple of the bolts, then using the crowbar to push it back on there. You got to have it lined up just right or she won't go. I got everything snugged down. Those do not have to be all that tight, so they're tight, but I did not do any torque spec or anything on them. They're not coming loose. Anyhow, now it's out to the hard part, or to the part that if you screw up, it'll blow up your engine. Now I got to get the belts in here with the new tensioners. Let's go over to the bench. So I have all three of these tensioners. This one I need to take apart. And then these two are ready to go back on. Basically, I have the bolts with them and everything. So let's go ahead and get those tensioners replaced right now. I'm going to try to show you this bolt down here. And you can see that bolt that has the weep around it. It's under your exhaust manifold. So you need to pull that bolt out, and then you need to shove like a 3-inch long Allen wrench, the fattest one as you can get in there, fairly decent anyway. That will tell you if your oil pump is lined up or not. I came out here and was playing around with that. I also added coolant, and because the main thing I wanted to see if this thing was going to leak, because I don't want this leaking inside the belt housing area. So I blew this all out. Oops, I didn't mean to zoom you in there. I blew this all out, got everything cleaned out of there, wiped a bunch of stuff down, wiped all the antifreeze off the floor. So I'm going to leave this for today. I might come back out later tonight. I'll see if I have time or not. But that's kind of what we're at for today. Got the water pump back in. I haven't done the pulleys yet. I did get them that one mounted. Got the bolts for the other two. So I may come back out later and at least do those. And tomorrow when I'm fresh and not tired, because I'm a little tired, it beat me up a little bit today, I'll start putting stuff back together, and I should have it back together by tomorrow night. Well, I found some energy and went ahead and got that roller in there. You can look up the torque spec for your car but I got that idler roller in there, and I've got these two bolts in over here for the power steering pump, and these two started also. All right, so I got that lower belt on there, that whatever belt you want to call it, the one that goes behind there. I do not know how you get that behind that plate. I imagine you got to take this big bolt off of here. I did rotate the engine some. I'm hoping I didn't bend a valve. So don't do what I did. This plate is behind this gear here, so you'd have to bust that off of there somehow. I didn't have my impact till this afternoon. I wasn't even thinking when I rotated the engine that I could damage something. That's the whole point of being careful with this stuff. Anyhow, that plug on the front, I stuck a wrench in there. This is still lined up like I thought it would be because I hadn't moved this. Because I got this locked on here so this wouldn't spin around. Like I say, I put that small belt in there, kind of tension it. I just put a screwdriver under here and kind of give it a little extra tension. She's good to go. Really didn't take a whole lot, and that belt is plenty taut. And now I'm going to put this crankshaft position sensor back in. Put those two bolts back in real quick, and then I'll be back. My understanding is you start from the top, which makes sense. You don't start at the top, but you feed it down through the top. And then the last thing we'll put on will be the belt putting on top of the camshaft up here on top. On top. Okay, new day. Time to put this tensioner in. So this one came with a new tensioner, so I'm going to use it. Otherwise, you would have to compress this down and put a nail or something through those two holes once they line up. And when you compress that, you have to compress it very slow. Very slow. But this one already came pre-tensioned with a, it's got the pull pin. So we're going to be putting him up in there, bolting him in, and we'll set our pre-tension. When you pull this out, then they want you to, then your timing's all set on your car. Then they want you to crank the engine around 2 full revolutions and then let it sit for a while and let that belt kind of stretch a little bit, kind of settle in. Then you come back and you should be able to put this pin back in. So you're going to put this in, get the belt pre-tensioned, pull this pin out, crank it around a couple of times, and then see if this pin goes back in. If it does, then your pre-tension was set good, and then this didn't have to take up a bunch of slack already, because I imagine this only has so much travel, and this is what this is for adjusting for the slack on the belt. So you don't want it adjusting right away. You want to have that initial tension set right to start with. Got everything put together down below, got the tensioner in place, and yeah, with the slack in the belt and whatnot, I ended up being off by 1 cog. So I've got to take it off and move it over again. It happens. All right, that was not that easy to do. Had a friend help me kind of push on that pulley because I don't have the special wrench. Used a really large flat blade screwdriver and pry it on there. Real careful not to scratch the surface of the idler pulley. We got it tight, rotated the engine twice, and was just barely able to get the pin out. I'm supposed to let it set for 20 minutes, but whatever. For me, that's about as good as it's going to get. I can't get it any tighter. We've tried 3 different times now. So, it was good. We didn't end up with a huge adjustment right away on the tensioner. So that should last another 50,000, 60,000 miles. Try not to jump too far ahead of you here. I did take a break, but I got the bottom cover kind of in place. Now, I don't have the bolts in it. Now I'm going to get the top cover in place. And get that all bolted in. Then we can get the belts on, and then we can see if she runs. Alright, so I got that pulley on there. That's a water pump pulley. One of the things I did to get the bolts tight was I put the wooden handle of one of my tools in between the pulley and the engine mount. Kind of wedged it in there to keep the pulley from turning. That shouldn't damage anything, and I was able to get them pretty darn tight. If you have anything that you're putting together and you're not sure of, a little blue Loctite goes a long ways. You can always get it apart later, but it'll help keep it from coming apart now. I am going to try to start it without the belts on. I've got everything else tightened up. I want to make sure it runs. If it doesn't, it might be a Mitsubishi for sale. As you can see, the headlights are on. I already hooked up the battery. Still jacked up over there. Okay. Success. I can confirm the 2.4 liter 16 valve can be cranked over 360 degrees while as long as this cam is in the top dead center. At least on mine. Don't take my word for it, but if you do it by accident like I did, I don't know what I was thinking. Anyway, it's running beautifully. I'm going to go ahead and I just put this over here so we can get stuck in the belts. I'm going to go ahead, well, stuck in the belts, there's no belts. Hey, I didn't want it in the fan. I'm gonna get the belts hooked up, and that is about it. I'll be back in just a few minutes. All right, so I started running out of time, so I apologize that I go into a lot of detail putting it back together. The engine mount's back in there. The belts are back on. The splash guard's back on under here, under the wheel well. Wheels back on the car. I'm ready to take it for a test drive. It did fire up before. I got it on the ground. Let's take it for a drive real quick. All right, battery's bolted down now. Okay, well, the car is outside. I've got a mess to clean up. As you saw by that belt, I was pretty much at the point where I needed to replace that. It was nice replacing the water pump too. It was nice it came part of that kit. I'll link that down in the description. So if you decide that you want to tackle this, you can. When you do take off that front bolt, there are some seals for the crank seal. So you can replace them. Also, they are included in the kit. I did not do those because I didn't take that part apart. I should have. Do not crank your engine over. You could damage it. Don't do what I did. All right, attempt number 2. I don't know where my outro went. Car's outside. Seems to be running fine. I took her for a trip down the block and back. So, a success. I made a bunch of mistakes. Watch a lot of videos. Maybe you can learn from my mistake. Don't rotate the engine at all. Take that bolt off the front. Then you can get that plate off of there. Just be careful. I got lucky. Nothing was damaged. I watched a bunch of videos and I still made mistakes. So, I mean, it's going to happen. Just try to minimize them being, damaging or big mistakes. Definitely recommend doing that water pump while you're in there. The timing belts, like I said, that small one is the one that tends to break. And then you might as well do your serpentine belts. I had just done mine recently, But if you hadn't done your serpentine belts, since you have all that stuff loose, you might as well get them done at the same time as well. Again, thanks to everybody for watching. Like, subscribe to the channel. It really helps. The comments are appreciated. If you have any questions, if you're planning on doing this, I'll be glad to answer them if I can. Definitely not an expert of the school of hard knocks here, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, I've taken plenty of things apart in my lifetime and they never went back together quite the way that they came apart, but I try. That's part of why I've got this channel, because I watch other people do stuff and I'm encouraged to try it myself, because a lot of the stuff, instead of paying someone else, you know, that's $500–600 at a shop, easy to pay someone for that. 100 plus the parts. I bought a $100 cheap kit off of Rock Auto, and I did it myself in a weekend. So that's part of the whole mantra of the do-it-myself garage, is why pay someone else when I can do it myself. And most of the time it works out okay. Sometimes not so much, but that's part of life and that's part of learning. Thanks again for watching. Have a great day, and we will see you in the next video. Bye.